Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. I am at the gorgeous Royal Botanical Gardens of Kew here in southwest London. Kew Gardens, as it is commonly known, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the oldest botanical gardens in the world, dating back to the 18th century. With so many years under its belt, Kew is obviously intertwined with British history and some of the more uncomfortable history regarding trade and colonialism, but throughout the years it has been a world leader in academic research in botany, and today it is committed to work tirelessly to understand and protect plants and fungi through partnerships with other populations and cultures around the world. Given Britain's long history with tea, Kew obviously has a big tea collection, and I have been kindly invited here by Aurora Prehn, an ethnobotanist with a focus on tea, to come and look through the Kew vaults, which are not open to public view, so that we can see some of the tea historical oddities. Let's go meet her.
How are you?
Hello, Aurora. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again too. Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello, what is your
This
name?
is Ayana.
Have a hug?
Oh, you're giving a hug.
Thank you.
Do you know this woman's name? What's her name? Do you know her name? Yeah, you were so excited to meet Aurora, weren't you?
Hello, welcome. Okay. Righto. Okay, we're gonna start moving the racks and film it. Okay. The racks are on this side, so we need to roll each one over and open up the tea section.
Wow.
So all of these are organized by plant family, and it goes down to genus species. So we need the Acacia, Camellia sinensis. Hello.
Hello.
So, welcome to our tea collection. It's stored here in the Economic Botany collection here at Kew in the Acacia Camellia section, which starts here and goes all the way down, starts at the top and goes all the way down here to this pink post-it note. And
the advanced pink post-it note.
Very advanced. So all of the labels are in transition right now, so don't look at those. But we have about 20 items or so, 20 to 25, that are not tea. They're another species in the Camellia genus. So most of what you're seeing here is tea, is Camellia sinensis. So lucky for me, I have a big collection to kind of play with here. So I thought we'd take a few out to talk about and look at more closely.
Let's look at some of your oddities and historical
oddities.
Well, let's see. What do you have that's really old?
Really old.
Yeah.
Well, first let me get some gloves because that's important.
Yeah.
If we're gonna look at some old tea, then we really best practice is to wear gloves so you don't damage anything. So one of our first items that's really of interest to me is what we have here. Some tea lozenges from 1812. It's one of our two oldest items. The lozenge right in the middle has some Chinese characters on it, some Hanzi, you can see.
So this reminds me of cha gao, which is the concentrated tea extracts that you see in Yunnan. But it wouldn't be amazing to dunk that in some water and see what happens.
This is probably the hardest part of this project has been not consuming the collection. We don't really have a lot of references and talking about them. Certainly in Chinese translated into English, we have different collector accounts, and in one of the pieces it actually says that it tastes great. That they did try it before they glued them onto this piece of paper. So I'm really quite jealous, but that they said like it's still strong, it tastes like tea. So we have an account saying that that they were just like taken straight. But I also
just popped in the mouth.
Popped in the mouth, but I think it is a concentrated form, right? So I do think that you could dissolve it in some hot water or pour boiling water on top. So a lot of these lozenges are imprinted with different symbols, even some leaf or floral images, and some, as I said, have some Hanzi characters there. So It's one of our favorite items. So we are looking for different lozenges in the same kind of use to add to our collection to kind of show the same use but in different centuries.
Okay, I'm going to get you some of those.
Oh, please.
So how many pieces do you think you have here?
The camellia section is about 425, and the tea section within that is about 400 to 410.
400. Okay.
And about 78 of those we're accessioning right now that are new things that have come in since I started at the end of 19. So we're growing the collection quite quickly. You can see that the shelves are full, but that doesn't really stop us. If it's of interest to us and it adds and makes the collection stronger, then we're interested in it. So I have a long wish list.
So let's dive into, why don't we pull out some of your favorite little pieces and we can okay, sit and have a chat about them. Okay, we pulled out lots and lots of interesting treats for us to dive into, but before we get into it, we need to introduce you formally to everybody out there, the tea heads out there. So this is Aurora. Why don't you give the brief summary of who you are, what you're doing here?
Well, I'm American. I'm here for the summer, studying tea in the Economic Botany collection here at Kew Gardens. Back in the States, I'm the biocultural collection manager at the Missouri Botanical Garden, the equivalent collection that we have in the States. We call it by a different name. And I'm a tea head. I'm a tea nerd. So I worked in industry for about 5 years, between 2013 and 2018. Left industry to do a master's in ethnobotany here in England and kind of got stuck. So
that tends to happen. But and tell me a little bit about your travels. Where have you seen tea production?
Oh, I've seen tea grow in 7 different countries. So name them all. But I've in China, Korea, Japan, country of Georgia, Nepal, Bangladesh.
So a certified tea head here, and I've sort of seen her little tea collection in her office, and clearly there's some high grade tea there. So I think that they've got the right person in charge for this job. And so, what is your sort of responsibility? What are you doing here at Kew?
I'm here writing up the tea collection, so it's part of the Economic Botany collection, as I said. So. The EBC has around 100,000 items. About 425 of those are in the Camellia genus. Most of the Camellia genus is Camellia sinensis, which is tea, and that's about 400, I would say. So I'm here writing up, looking at all of them as a whole. I've repacked some. I've looked at them by their format, so is it loose or compressed? Which categories do we have? Which types do we have? I've looked at the ages, the donors, really have looked at it through a variety of different filters. But really, this writing up section of really trying to just write a summary of what do we have here and what's the significance is diving into the Kew's archive that we have here in the library right next door and pulling out some of those details and getting them back into the database that we have here. So the collection has been here since 1847. It's been growing ever since then. So back then they didn't record as much detail as we would have that we'd want today. So I'm finding those in old letters and publications and getting them back into the database.
So you're like literally following the threads.
Yes.
And trying to come up with some sort of conclusions about provenance and the story behind it and what the tea actually is.
What it is probably the biggest question in some cases. Yeah, the donors, how it got to Kew and why. Why did they think it was interesting enough to bring it, carry it around the world and bring it to Kew? So yeah, there's so much more work to be done. I feel like I've just scratched the surface. I've been saying that for quite a while.
Yeah, well, that's the way with tea in general.
There's been some really great tangents and have really gone down some rabbit holes of literature, and I've learned so much in doing that. So it's a great material culture project.
Cool. Well, let me get my gloves on.
Yep. You're in a collection, you need some gloves?
Yep, absolutely. And what are we going to look at first? I see a pu'er cake in front of me.
You see it, yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's pu'er or if it's just a sun-dried... it actually says pu'er on it.
So both of these are our 2 oldest pu'er cakes. I'm a sucker for pu'er. I love it. So the one that you see here in the tin, we can open up, was collected in 1858 in Shanghai by Dr. Lockhart, who founded the first English-speaking hospital in Shanghai. He was en route back to China and collected along the coast as a gift and brought back. So if we open it up.
So this is a 1858.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So you'll find the packaging really similar to what you see today. So we have two different labels here. One is handwritten, and then one is typed out saying the same thing. The invigorating tea of China.
So it was being marketed as the invigorating tea.
Yes, let me read it exactly.
Okay.
So pu'er cha, invigorating tea of Yunnan, in a Chinese box with a description in Chinese, Fuzhou. So he left Shanghai and picked it up in Fujian.
Okay, so this is what 160 plus year old pu'er looks like.
Yes.
This is a very rare thing to see tea that old, especially a tea which is so loved by so many tea heads out there. And obviously the temptation, as you said before, was to just get a pick out and...
Yeah, so pu'er has always been of interest, from what I can see in the records here at Kew, and in the archive I actually just found in their miscellaneous reports, they actually took some leaves out of both cake, brewed it, and then laid it flat and made an herbarium specimen of the pu'er leaf.
Oh, wow.
In the book, it's all these miscellaneous papers and letters and cuttings and newsprints, and then you flip, and then there's some pages of pu'er leaf dried in the book.
And did they describe the taste? Did they drink it, or did they just literally hydrate it?
I think they just hydrated it and put out, but they were trying to compare the leaf shape. They're in rough shape, believe me. We also found a little packet of lepet, which is like disintegrated.
Oh, right, okay.
But
lepet being pickled tea leaves.
Yeah. So it just goes to show they went to the extent of pulling this cake out, brewing it next to this one, and saying like the cake collected by John Fryer and the cake collected by Lockhart here. So
and it's interesting that they reference it as pu'er tea, because there's a lot of sort of discussion about whether or not this would be called pu'er tea back in 150, 200 years ago. So. Clearly, it was called pu'er tea back then, and was that? Do you think that was simply because of the trading port or the trading town, or was it known as pu'er tea type? No idea.
That's really hard to distinguish.
Yeah, sure.
But they were collected. They both were collected along the coast, so it could be the tea that comes from
the tea that comes from pu'er.
Pu'er Yunnan,
yeah. Yunnan.
It could, but I do think. When I first was looking at these, I thought they were referring to them as the type. It could be the location, but looking at the materials that we have here in the archives, I do think it was distinct.
It seems from the labeling, can we just move this one to the side and you can see the other one? It seems from the labeling here that it is saying pu'er tea, and you would imagine that it would normally say something like green tea from pu'er if it was just referring to the prominence.
Most of the collection is saying a green tea or black tea or something like that. Right, exactly. So they were aware at the time that there are different categories. So in the late 19th century, which a bulk of the collection has come from, originates from, they were saying black or green, but then there was like this unique bit of pu'er, and they just didn't really get it. Is it the new Indian tea? Is it a Chinese tea? Is it a Chinese leaf tea, but the leaves are really big? Is it a green? Is it a black? Is it a lepet? It's a
similar discussion that's actually happening right now. So
which was really, I was really delighted to see that. And that it's still a conversation.
Yeah.
And that makes it really, really fun. So... we can set that down and we can lift this up, but you can see the leaves have a very red color. So the typed label here is the same as the label on top of the glass, but you can see here the shape of take the label out here.
I mean, the pickings look pretty okay.
Yeah,
it's not too rough. Wow, there you go.
That's the bud set right there.
Ancient pu'er. I don't know how you're resisting.
Oh, it is so hard. It is so hard. But the one thing that keeps me really from doing it is bugs love plants.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it could kill you.
These biocultural collections are. This is true in other museums where there's plant-based artifacts that they have been laced with pesticides over time. So we don't know, these items being so old, we don't know if they ever were laced with anything, including mercury. So in many cases, so we don't know. So we just don't consume anything in the collection. As much as I might want to, I don't smell anything. I don't believe that they're laced with any heavy metals or anything like that. No. But especially being something that was definitely a consumable at one time, I don't think they did anything to them. But still, it's not. Yeah, it's not something. It's also in science called destructive sampling. Yeah. Because you have to take away from the object and you can't ever put it back.
I get it. For lots of reasons you shouldn't, but the temptation is still there.
Yes, it is.
And I'm sure a lot of the people watching would be like, screw it.
Yeah.
Mercury poisoning, I'll take the risk.
Yeah, let's consume heavy metals. So I went on a tour, my first visit here, I asked to see the tea items because, obviously, and I saw this cake in the metal tin and I saw a clay teapot and I was like, do you know what you have here? Can I come back and help you with these things? And that's really how I got in. I was like, let me kind of translate and decode the collection here for you. And I couldn't believe the stuff that I've read about for so long. We have the material culture from the era. So these complement the text and the books and the images in so many cases. So,
is this the original packaging? That
at some point, I don't like it very much.
Oh yeah, you should,
you're going to set it on top, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll box these up and take a look at some other ones.
Okay, cool. Let's do that.
Lift and set, lift and set.
Do you have like extensive training sessions and?
Oh, God!
What?
I haven't looked under this.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! What does it say? Okay, take the glass off.
Okay, take the glass off. Don't drop the cake. Oh my God! This is a moment. Okay. You've been looking at this for how many? For so long.
Well, it was so fragile. I didn't want to.
You never looked underneath.
Well, I didn't want to look it up. So this is sitting on a piece of plywood and wrapped in like a really thin paper. No.
Don't trust me.
Can you read those Chinese characters? Oh, it's. I think it just says the same as what's on the lid.
Poor tea of
the Chinese drink a cup of the tea after heavy meal as a digestive.
So it was already being marketed as a digestive.
Oh yeah, the pu'ers are the only ones that actually say that it's a medicinal and for digestion.
Right. So over 150 years of discussion about.
So the Chinese drink a cup of the tea after heavy meal as a digestive. Over 2 cups might perhaps be indulged.
Over 2 cups.
But 3 would be productive of an inconvenience, and 4 positively dangerous.
So 3 would be productively an inconvenience.
1 is good, 2 is good, 3 is 4 is dangerous.
It's dangerous, positively dangerous.
Well, if anybody who's drank too much pu'er or any on an empty stomach knows what that feeling is like.
We see. The chazoi, the tea drunk, is being, the warning is on the bottom of the
so this is a letter. So this is all word of mouth that they've recorded in letters, and then early labels it's taking straight from the letter, from the thing. Excerpt from the letter from GMW Playfair, dated Pakoi February 20th, 1883. So this is, on the top level, is from a John Fryer letter. So these are actually taken straight from the letters. But so Playfair is the last name of a gentleman who donated a square pu'er cake. And these 3 cakes, their letters, they're talked about at the same time afterwards. So when the 1883 cake came in, they actually took an excerpt from that label and put it on this cake.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
That's what happened.
Right.
All right, so here we have one that I nickname the onion, because it's wrapped in bamboo leaves and tied on either side. So it kind of looks like the roots of an onion on the side. So I'm not going to set it down on the table because it is incredibly fragile, but you can see the tea kind of peeking through. And I think they actually probably parted the bamboo so you could see inside when it was on display at earlier. But this is another item that came from China, and it's to the point I said earlier that many of our early items are a variety of different formats coming from China.
So where is this from?
This one is from...
Is that a H-chart?
I know, right? This one's, I have to look it up in the catalog. The name is a large ball tea. So unfortunately, a lot of the names are just a visual description.
Yeah, sure.
So we have an item that is small ball tea.
It's just the challenge here is because these teas are so old that you can't really judge that much on the color. Or you can make some judgments, but those judgments are sort of guesses, best guesses, right?
Yeah.
Because it looks dark red. It looks like an aged pu'er again. It looks like a green tea that's been aged. Doesn't look like a black tea. Would you agree?
No, I think so.
So but it's hard when it's that old.
Well, that's why you have to look at the collection as a whole. Yeah. Because they're all brown. All the old teas. They're pretty much
teas are brown.
Pretty much all brown, except for some gunpowders you can tell look like a very gray green.
Yeah, sure.
But even some of our white teas, like the trichomes, like the hairs are really white still. The underside is almost a red. So their white teas are really looking like a red tea. But you can tell from the brown, when you're looking at the whole collection, you can really tell a brown that started out green or a brown that started out brown.
Yeah, sure.
I guess a black tea, or the really dark leaves where it could be heicha.
Yeah.
So it's and then so our next tea is Lepet, which I can't take out of the box because it's so fragile. But there are some teas I think that were fermented for sure, and were consumed as a food. Like the whole leaf was consumed and not brewed like a beverage. So this one is a Lepet tea. You can see that we see this all the time. I'm gonna just pull this out on the label. See if you can pull that out. Yeah. And zoom in on it. So you can see a different scientific name. So this collection is organized, as I said, by family, genus, species. So the nomenclature for tea has changed over time. So this one says Camellia thea link ? So they weren't sure. So at the time, that was the name they were using for
Camellia thea.
Camellia sinensis. That's what they. Yeah. So that was the name used at the time in the late 1890s.
Right.
Early.
So 1890s, they were calling Camellia sinensis Camellia thea from these. Where is this from? India? I mean, it's from Burma, but was it collected via India?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's wrapped in bamboo. We can't see the leaves, so if you have a portable X-ray, just let me know. You can take this bag out. So yeah, you can see that it's just. There's pieces. We collect everything that falls off, but the bamboo has broken off. But yeah, so we see Camellia. We see. I know. Seriously, I know.
So talk me through this. So you want to understand your collection, but you can't even tease it open a bit like they did with the onion.
No, if it destroys or damages the object, it is destructive sampling, and it needs to have merit. So there's a whole paperwork here at CUTE if you're going to remove anything. Just like if you want to take a sample off a dried herbarium specimen for DNA, that's a whole process. You have to record that. So it has to be justified. It has to be justified.
Okay.
Right, we have a variety of different formats, but again, this is coming from what we have a handful of objects along with our pu'er that's coming from the birthplace of tea. Yeah. All right, so you've heard of food purity laws, right?
Yep.
You've heard about the Victorian era, right?
Yep. I'm not sure they heard much about food purity laws, right?
No. I think they were really kind of wanted to cut everything and make a profit.
Yeah, exactly.
At some point. So this one's really, really neat. It is was collected from a factory in Guangzhou and brought back. The founder of the museum, William Jackson Hooker, wrote in a manual of scientific inquiry asking sailors or anybody out traveling, basically, to how was green tea made. They put that question out there in the botany chapter and how to collect specimens in this new museum in 1849. So 2 years. The museum was brand new, and he wanted to show, the point of the museum was to show from raw to processed. We have the gardens here. We still have it today. We have the gardens here for living plants, and we have the herbarium right next door of dried plants, but we didn't have a collection of plants in use. So artifacts, things made of plants. So that was the point of the museum in the beginning. So tea being a beverage being consumed, he wanted to show all parts of the market, which is great. So we have some adulterated leaves, and we have some tribute teas to the Chinese emperor. No, we have the whole range.
The whole range,
and
the whole span.
And then even in the 1900s, we have somebody went down to a warehouse and collected floor sweepings off the warehouse floor and submitted and gave to us. So we have dust to tribute teas. It's great. So this item was collected to show how green tea was made.
Right.
In China.
Or faked.
Or faked,
right.
Exactly. So it's a set that shows the dyeing of black tea to green.
This is amazing.
So give this little card here. It will just show the order, and it describes the set. The colors that we see are Prussian blue, turmeric, and gypsum.
So gypsum, Prussian blue,
and turmeric. Yep.
And this is all. So
the first tea here we have Bohua Sochong. Again, the names and grades of teas over time have evolved. So that
would have been a black tea.
This is a black tea, and then this one is roasted in iron pans. So these two are black.
So black tea, roasted.
Roasted, and number 3 is number 2 dyed.
So this is a dyed tea.
And 4 is the fine siftings of number 3, a Yang Hasong, and number 5 is the large siftings of it.
So basically, this is the sort of raw, and this is the finer, and this is the rougher, and these are all the dyes that they were using.
So this is a dyed, and then it's sifted. So you actually see nothing's happening, dry roasted. They're dyeing it, and then they're sifting it here, and then these are the dyes that are used.
So in other words, creating fake green tea from black tea leaves.
Which was really quite common in the 19th
century. Very, very
common.
And there's a sort of discussion about, how did it start? What prompted it? Was it, a practice that was happening in China, or was it a practice that was asked for? In other words, it was sort of something that the British asked them to do, is to basically create green teas in this way. And then afterwards, the clever marketing with Indian tea was, don't buy Chinese tea because it's adulterated and dyed. So if it was the case that, the Brits were asking for it to be dyed, and then saying, don't buy the tea because it's dyed, by Indian tea instead. So there's a lot of sort of stories that we could sort of try to unpack there, but wow, I mean, I've only ever heard of this. I've never seen it.
Yeah, this is also one I saw in the first bit. I was like, I could not believe it, because there's so much history. Even today, you have adulteration. You have people, putting iron filings to boost up chests. I mean, it does still happen. It's not just a Victorian thing isolated in history. It's definitely a concern. That's why we do have food purity laws to combat this. So we had, when the museum started, we had a bunch more teas that were adulterated by, as the guidebook says, by Chinese persons and by British tradespersons.
Okay,
it's both. So how did this practice start is a really good. I find this bit fascinating, because I think it's what you suggested was both, and it was a kind of a coevolution. So I think for in the beginning they were shipping truly made green teas, but via ship around Africa and up to Britain. So I don't think they made it. By the time they arrived in Britain, I don't think they were very green.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the perception of green tea changed through the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s of what is green tea perceived received and looked like on the other side of the world at the time. And once the introduction of air freight came in, it changed much.
But then it is true that for a lot of people in Victorian England, that was what green tea was thought to be. It was dyed tea, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, this is like number 4 and 5 here. This is what it looks different now, of course.
Yeah, sure.
But
you can imagine that being quite vibrant green.
So this was collected in 1852.
Okay. So again, 160 years plus.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really fascinating conversation, but I do think that there's a botanical and a cultural and an economic and transport layer to the question about adulteration or tampering or spurious teas, as they were called in the guidance. Okay,
so these are some of the real jewels of the collection, right? Or at least the ones that you've been spending most of your time on.
No, I keep reaching dead ends on them.
Right.
So I've had the best luck understanding these 3. We'll start with these 3 jars here by asking people like you and other people in industry, some tea historians. We've had a few workshops here earlier in 2019, and most people I spoke with were unfamiliar with the tea. And it was only like through kind of the tea community was I able to connect with people who had some idea of what is going on here.
But we still don't know for sure, right?
We still don't know for sure.
And this is a call out to anybody out there who might be able to supply us with information. Aurora is waiting for more information. If you know, if you could pass this on through your contacts to people who may know, historians or people in the tea industry or people potentially in China. I've reached out to some of my contacts regarding them and I've got some thoughts on it, but we'll look at them first. So how are they being described and how did they come into the collection?
Right, so this one, we'll start with this guy because it is the smallest of the smallest jar and the prettiest in... There you go. Oh, perfect. Came into the collection in 1983.
Okay.
With another jar from the Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain.
Okay.
And I think that they were accessioned as one unit because they were similar teas, and so they were accessioned as the same thing, but they have completely 2 different origins. So the label on the front here is an Apothecary Label from Central Europe, and it has not been opened.
Central Europe?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The ink is really quite faded, so we're looking at, we're trying to figure out to decipher the label still. But it's the same tea as this other one that came in from the Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain. You can see from the label is the only tea that we have from Robert Fortune. Yeah.
Do you want to briefly just for those who don't know who Robert Fortune is?
Robert Fortune is actually is a plant hunter, and so I should say past tense.
Well, you know, his legacy lives on.
Yeah, his legacy. So Robert Fortune was a plant hunter. How he's called today, also horticulturalist. So he wasn't a trained botanist. He was hired by the Horticultural Society, now the RHS, and then by the East India Company to travel to China to bring back plants, including tea. His success after the first expedition is how East India Company got hold of him. He was working at the Chelsea Physic Garden, and through word of mouth, he was promoted to go to get connected and go back to China and just focus on tea. So he started traveling, and his name is really cemented in history with tea because he was successful in using the brand new technology, which is the Wardian case.
Which you have.
Which we have one here.
One here, yeah.
Not connected to Fortune at all.
Okay.
It's a late 19th century case over there. But
just so that they understand, what's a Wardian case?
So Wardian case is named after a amateur botanist and medical doctor, Nathaniel Ward, and he basically realized that if you have a mini greenhouse and you cap it, it's its own ecosystem.
Yeah.
So you don't have to open it, which solves the solution of shipping plants on moving and transporting plants via ship, where you needed to save your precious fresh water and water your plants.
Sure.
So that is huge.
Yeah.
That basically opened up moving plants through the late 19th century. So they're really hard to find today because once they realized that moving buckets of soil around the world and a thing, like digging up soil and plants, putting them in a box, moving them around the world, and then dumping that soil was spreading diseases and pests like crazy.
Okay.
So you have cases of that into the 20th century.
Okay.
So once they linked the two, they actually burned them. So they were one-way cases, and they burned them.
Okay.
So Fortune used these and figured out how to ship plants, so he did so successfully. And he wrote popular books, so that cemented his name forever in connection with tea, though that tea was one plant of many that he brought from China to the West, and including the U.S., and he was not the first person to move tea outside of China.
Okay.
He just wrote about it. And he was never hired by Kew Gardens. So people think that Kew hired him to steal tea from China and bring it to... Actually, it was the East India Company.
Sure.
And not Kew.
It's not Kew's fault.
The Botanical Garden Network and Kew is connected, but indirectly.
Sure.
But it was never hired or contracted. Actually, his contract is on a copper plate saved in the British Library.
Wow.
So if you really want to see exactly what he was tasked to do, you can find it in the archive there. And you also should find a book by Alistair Watt, published in 2017, and I would say is the only book on Fortune out there that really gives the whole picture and a fair picture about it.
Not just a dramatized villain of
everyone loves
stealing
writing the
tea.
spy novel. Oh, I just stole. I mean, he did do some unethical things. I'm not saying that. But as far as moving plants, he wasn't traveling in the right. He was illegally going into areas where foreigners at the time were not allowed. Yeah. But the fact that he was moving plants around the world and moving things was legal at the time. Everyone was doing that. Yeah. And he's brought back so many plants. If you go walk around botanical gardens, and honestly in people's backyards are probably growing plants that were brought from Fortune to the UK.
So yeah, massive legacy.
So, there's a huge legacy. So anyway,
So this is called Fancy Tea.
It is. It's called Fancy Tea on this jar. It's called Fancy Tea and Old Men's Eyebrows on this jar.
So you've got sort of different names for what looks like a similar style of tea. And we're trying to understand what it is, where it's from. Mm-hmm. Do we know which province?
So the jar from Fortune, he never went to Yunnan province, but the jar says it is there. The leaves are from Yunnan.
From Yunnan.
So they're collected on the coast. I do believe it's handmade. So I believe the leaves are twisted, individually twisted on themselves, and then twisted around another, or maybe two other. Yeah. And then they're stacked up, and then tied on either ends with dyed silk thread. Or natural fibers, as you can see. So they're all roughly like the same length, like an inch to inch and a half. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never seen anything like that before. I've seen, there is tea that is sort of bundled up and braided, but never like that. Mm-hmm. And
so at the time,
and the size of the leaf just looks quite big.
We have a board where, can you grab that to the side? So we have a scan here from a print from 1897 talking about the material culture of tea at the time. And in this illustration, we actually have it listed here as right next to ball tea and eyebrow tea, other tea types that we have in the collection, so by different names. So we can see it was known about in the West and published about by the turn of the last century.
So what is it? It's called faggot tea here.
It is, because it looks like a bundle of sticks. Yeah. So we actually see that name in a letter from the earlier time period than this. In the 1870s, I see it's referenced as faggot tea as well. So having a visual illustration here from a little bit later than our objects, but showing the name with an illustration is great and really telling of what they're talking about.
They've even got like Tibetan brick tea and everything here. So the question is, what is this tea? And it's baffled me a little bit. I did reach out to you and say that my contacts in China say that it could be kuding, ancient kuding.
It could be.
Because that's I sent you a picture of how it looks remarkably similar.
It does.
But that's just shape. You know,
it is shape.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be that was just a style of shaping leaves at that time.
Yeah, it could. And how is it brewed? Is it untied and you take 1 or 2 out? Is it pre-dosed for a larger teapot? Is this just a quantity for sale, for transport?
Well, you look at it and you'd say that each one of those braids, each one of those little twisted, is 2 leaves twisted together.
I'd say that they're 2. Yeah.
So you would imagine that might be 1 brew, a couple of leaves, but it's a bit small. And also the leaves, because they're twisted, they're going to be actually longer than that, right?
Yeah.
So they're probably going to be something like about... that's a Samaka size, no?
Yeah, but some of them are considerably shorter.
Yeah.
So, it's just really quite hard to tell.
The texture of the leaf it's so hard because of the fact that it's been shaped so dramatically. It's probably like fixed the texture a little bit more compared with other ones, but it just looks different, doesn't it? It doesn't look like the sort of texture that you'd expect from like a straight tea leaf, but it's impossible to know without
brewing
it. I'm afraid.
So maybe one day, and then we'd flatten it into a barium specimen and add it to the archive.
Exactly. So
I have a plan. I have a long-term plan.
You just got to like make the moves, make it happen.
So
and make sure you invite me.
So, well, before we get into this one, this one is another. So this guy here and this one were both collected by the Scorser family, or G.C. Scorser, for the firm of Fordham and Mason and Company. So these are some of the oldest Fordham and Mason teas that are known to exist. So Fordham and Mason lost a majority of their archive during World War II.
Oh, really?
They moved it out of Piccadilly to Richmond is one location in West London, and they moved to suburbs, and they both got hit, but Piccadilly did not. So they lost their archives. So we have their oldest Fordham and Mason teas right now. So they're rebuilding their archive. So if anybody has historic Fordham and Mason items that they're looking for a good home they no longer would like, please reach out. We can connect you with Fordham and Mason's archivist who's rebuilding their archive one by one.
So this is tea type?
I believe it's a black.
You think that's a black?
Or it's a HI. I mean, I don't think it was a green. I think it was rolled. There's so many variables, but yeah. So these two are from Fordham and Mason, is another similar type that we saw in the illustration. And then this is the other one, part of that illustration that we have here.
Right.
So I call these, our nickname are the Cigar Tea, but you can see, again, this in the illustration, this is the one that was called Eyebrows.
Eyebrows, yeah.
Yeah. And in this piece right here, you can see that there is a little bit of newspaper sticking out, Chinese newspaper sticking out of between the leaves. I do think these were just stacked.
And rolled like a cigar.
Yeah, rolled a little bit and then tied at the end, just on one end.
So that's definitely dosed. That is to throw in, no?
I think so.
Yeah.
So, if these two, if the ball tea and this eyebrow tea is dosed, then why wouldn't the old man's eyebrow tea, the fancy tea?
I think it could be dosed. It just seems like quite a lot to throw into.
I know.
It's quite.
Right? But some of them are.
But then
small.
imagine if you were not dosing it. You were you expected to untie all of those strings? It seems a bit awkward.
Yeah, you're not going to tie them back up.
Exactly, and then you just got a mess.
Right. So
and then how would it brew actually if you brewed them like that? Because they are so tightly twisted and tied that I don't think you'd get much expansion.
No, you'd have to untie them. You'd have to untie the 3 or the 2 strands for sure.
And then just throw the whole load in.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we thinking in terms of type for this? So I'm gonna just
see. They're more of a red color.
It's got that red
I
color.
do think it was. It's not a H-Cha.
No.
I think these. I think a very similar color to the Twisted.
So you think they're just genuinely aged, like greens, or
aged light oxidized?
Yeah, light oxidized,
green.
aged.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. Do you think it's black? No.
That's
You'd expect it to be darker.
Red color.
Yeah.
I would expect it. The Twisted Teas are quite light, but if you compare it to these ball teas.
But then, if you look at this one here, I'm assuming that that's a picture of like it when it's ready, like when it was fresh for the market, and that's that color.
Yeah. Or or it took so long to get to the UK to transport that it was originally green or a different color. But I do think that maybe, yeah, it's so hard to tell. But then you see, look at this brick tea of Tibet. This is a lighter brown than this.
Exactly. I'm edging towards it being more oxidized at the time of production, but
yeah.
Hard to know.
Really hard to know. All right.
So again, anybody out there who has any information that might be useful, then please do reach out to us.
All right. So do you know where the oldest prepared tea leaves are in the UK?
No.
I believe that they are from the late 1600s. Early 1600s. From the Natural History Museum.
Okay.
In the Sloan collection. Ours are not that old. So these 2 are our oldest items in the collection. That I believe. Still trying to figure out the provenance details. So going back to 1808, possibly the late 1790s. But
Okay.
nothing as close as the 2 in the Natural History Museum.
Okay. All right.
In downtown London. So.
Wow. Get that.
Yeah. Again, the great same color.
Same color, yeah.
Of this red.
So this is date range around the turn of the century, 1800. Black tea would have been invented by that point.
So this tea is called wheat sheaf tea.
Wheat sheaf tea.
Unless that is,
reasons.
yes, you're right. Unless it is a direct translation. Which I don't think it is. I think they saw it as like, oh, this is the one that looks like wheat sheaf.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help me.
Yeah. Pretty useless, but.
In the same letter I was referring to from, I believe, the 1860s, they were referring to a wheat sheaf tea in the same letter.
Okay.
So again, this
you got the connection.
This was a known about type in the early to mid.
But and type, we're talking about a style of processing and shaping. But trying to work out the type in the province is near on impossible, right? At this point.
Unless we find more archival resources and accounts, and if we even find a description of the processing, we could kind of determine it in 2022 standards. Maybe can kind of answer that question then and now, but that's tricky.
Again, the color is remarkably similar to all of these teas here, right? This sort of reddish hue on it. Would a green tea that's 200 plus years, like, just naturally create that color, or is that the color? You know, I'm leaning towards it was oxidized.
I think so.
You know, when it was fresh. But is it a black tea?
I don't know.
Does it matter?
Yes. Yes, it does. Right. So this one is how we have the date. If you look at this brick, it's our oldest item, and it says on there in accession number of 1808/5 572. And it says a Mandarin tea, Dr. Dinwoody, 1808/572. I believe that is a catalog number. So when the museum started in 1847, it was started by a lot of personal items from William Jackson Hooker's own collection. So they were in some level inventory, but many of them weren't. He just emptied out his house. Right?
It's just stuff I've got lying around.
Yeah, so the name I cannot find anywhere as it's spelled on the label, but I did find a Dinwiddie, James Dinwiddie, who was on a trip to China in the late 1790s and traveled through to India and then back to the UK and arrived in 1807 and had his own private kind of curiosity cabinet of different teas and items from his travels. And I'm hesitant to say that it was him wholeheartedly because we don't have a direct link of like a letter saying, I'm sending you this tea brick for your museum or something like that. In many cases we found that. But he did travel in East Asia. He arrived at the same time. The name is very similar. And tea was part of that trip to China. So
it's highly likely.
It's highly likely.
That's just a little typo there.
Yeah, somebody just didn't know how to spell the name. Yeah,
just to make your life
Woody
a little bit more inconvenient.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, somebody was just trying to vex me in the future, back in the days. Yeah, so it is a really compressed tea. Yeah, so it's that label in the record. We know that they're both from Dinwoody, so we can say that they're roughly about from the same time period of 1808.
And the compression on that looks pretty hefty. It looks very compressed.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Who knows? HR probably.
Yeah.
So HR from 1800. That's 1808, right?
Possibly
17.
If I can find any more evidence, I will link it to the 18th century. These two items would be our oldest and our only ones from the 18th century.
Incredible. Amazing. And that's just scratching the surface of all the goodies you have over there.
Well, the good news is this summer we're photographing everything, so it will be online.
So it's going to be online, so for public to see?
Yep. Yeah. So the database is accessible online right now, but we are getting everything imported and uploaded in the coming months. So it is partially available online now, the database, but the images and complete database will be coming online soon. I can't wait to show this with all the other tea nerds out there.
Okay, well, I'm going to stick links to anything that I can in the description below, and you can go check it out and follow along. And what's next for you? You're not here for that much longer, right? I'm not. I'm leaving this collection behind to go back to my other collection that I mentioned, my other babies. Yeah, but hopefully I'll be back next year to kind of continue doing this work and expand it throughout my career. Really. Okay, I'll put links for Aurora's website. I have a website. Your website. So we'll put a link down so you can reach out to her if you want to converse further. And please do let us know if you have any information about any of the teas that you have seen here, or if you've got some historical samples that you might want to sort of put under Aurora's nose, and or for Fordham and Mason as well. Yeah. So actually, I do have a page on my website with a few of the images and talking a bit about this project and how to access the database here, and as well as the museum entry books. So it's very common to have a recorded record or ledger of everything that kind of came into the museum. So Q's entry books for the museum are available online up to 1920 for copyright permissions, like up to 1920. Up to I think it's up to 1925 right now. Yeah, right, but for anybody living, we don't put those online. You have to come here. So. Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, fascinating. I could spend the whole day here and looking through all of the tea collection, and then when you sort of disappear, I'll just pour some. Yeah, do you want a cup of tea? Get some boiling water and just pick out one of those wheat sheaves. And what would you do if you came back and you saw it just brewing? You'd
be out and then you'd be drinking
own
it.
You. And then I would dry it and make an herbarium specimen and say,
Exactly.
this is a happy accident.
exactly. You see, it's good. Once it hits water, that's it.
That's clean. Yeah, I know. There'll be more coming out of this space for sure.
Okay, all right. Well, you know, I'm sure everyone out there is itching to taste something here. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting us to come and take a look at this collection, and we'll, you know, watch with wide eyes and see what comes next. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening.
So I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek into the tea collection at Kew. Some amazing tea treasures and oddities. If you have any information, then please do reach out to us and we'll share them with Aurora. And make sure that Kew Gardens is on your hit list if you ever visit London. They have 50,000 living plant species and over 7 million botanical artifacts. Incredible. That's it, tea heads. Check out other videos, taste our teas wherever you are in the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being a part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the good stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.